With New York's century-old subway system in crisis, plagued by delays and in need of major repairs, Andy Byford was brought in from Toronto on Tuesday to take over the agency that oversees the city's buses and subways. The appointment of Mr. Byford as the president of New York City Transit comes on the heels of series of changes in leadership at the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, which oversees the subway system, aimed at restoring accountability and changing a culture that for years has left the subway without adequate funding or support. Even as the subway's antiquated infrastructure, including its signal systems and tracks, was breaking down at an increasing rate, the money spent on maintenance has remained essentially the same, when adjusted for inflation, as it was 25 years ago, according to a recent investigation by the New York Times. Mr. Byford will take control of an agency that has often proved intransigent and opaque and dominated by a political dynamic in which elected officials have often used the Transportation Authority to serve their political priorities, at the expense of investing sufficiently on the nuts and bolts that could have averted the crisis that has engulfed the transit system. Those decisions have helped create a situation in which just 65% of weekday trains reach their final destination on time, the lowest rate since the transit crisis of the 1970s. Unlike the 70s, when subways covered in graffiti became emblems of urban decay and the city faced a financial meltdown, the current problems are all the more galling to riders and advocates because they come at a time when the city is booming and flush with tax revenues. Exacerbating the problem and making solutions harder to come by, City Hall and Albany remain divided over how to address both the short and long-term financial needs of the subways, a dynamic that Mr. Byford will likely have to learn to navigate quickly in order to reverse the subway's decline. Veronique Hakim led New York City Transit from the end of 2015 until earlier this year before she was elevated to the Executive Committee of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. Since her departure, several interim leaders have been placed in charge of the organization on an interim basis, most recently Timothy Mulligan. But ever since Gov. Andrew M. Cuomo, who controls the Transportation Authority, declared a state of emergency to help speed measures to deal with the crumbling subway system and appointed Joseph J. LaHota to run the authority, Mr. LaHota has spent much of his time focused on the subway system. Since his arrival, officials have stepped up work to address some of the root causes of delays, overcrowding, sick passengers, and track and signal problems. Mr. LaHota announced an $836 million action plan to tackle the most urgent needs, including expanding rapid response teams to fix track problems, assigning emergency medical technicians at crucial stations to deal with passengers needing medical assistance, and directing riders to less crowded areas of a platform to make it easier for them to get on and off trains. We are thrilled that Andy is going to lead New York City Transit during this time of great change, Mr.